I'm going to take you through a quick demo. I'm going to talk about two what we think are CAS relevant use cases, one of which is how you can automate or streamline your payroll entry process, getting a payroll entry from just a flat file into Sage Intacct. And I'm going to show you how to do it with our brand new email ingestion functionality to really make it a seamless process. Secondly, we're going to then allocate that. This could be like a month-end allocation, could be an OpEx allocation, but in our case, we're going to do it as a payroll allocation, also in Sage Intacct. And then lastly, I'm going to show you a little bit about some wizards that we have for just easy setup of these different integrations. So both the end product and then how we get there for some of these types of integrations. So on my screen here, one thing I like to always highlight in my demo group is this favorite section. You can see I have many different systems, many different use cases. There's a lot of Sage Intacct in there, but you can also see some Salesforce. I have some flat files through SFTP and then some Google Sheets giving data, many more. And so I like to highlight when it comes to DataBlend, especially if you're in the CAS world and you're working with many different software across your many clients, this is going to give you a platform to manage all of those in one place. And this is kind of how it would look like as an end product. The two we're focusing on today are going to be these two though, right? It's going to be the payroll entry and then allocating that payroll entry. So the first thing we're going to do is send in our payroll entry into Intacct. So I'm opening up my email here, and what we're going to do is send an email with that file. So if I go back into DataBlend, I have it open on this tab, but my credential for my SFTP, you can see that I created a folder essentially, and I just named it zg_payroll@datablendfiles.com. So if you have this functionality turned on, you name it whatever makes sense for you, and that becomes the destination that I'm sending this to. And you also have control over who can send that in, because you don't want everybody to have access to, or anybody that guesses that email address to now just be able to send in files. This is going to allow you to lock that down. And in my case, only I can send it to that location. But we're going to take that email address. Let's go back over here, and we just put in ZG, payroll, and then I'm going to grab this is a random Excel. It doesn't look anything like what Intacct needs. And I'm not going to modify it in any way. I don't need to make it look like an Intacct import. It's just a file that I got from Paycom or whatever payroll system I'm using. One of my clients might have sent it to me. I could have picked it up off of SharePoint, but they've sent that to me. And I can even have them directly email it to this location too, right? I don't have to be the one sending it as long as you make them an approved sender. But once I did, you'll see in my history section, it's running that workflow. It's actively running that the moment I sent that email. And I didn't need to kick anything off. I only have this open so visually you can see what it's doing. But what this is happening in these 4 steps is it's receiving that email. It's going to reformat it, make it look the way that it needs to so that Sage Intacct will accept it. It's going to post it into Sage Intacct, and it's going to run some validation against that same data as well. And so let's say that you have someone sending this in directly, or you're sending it in directly, and you're not actually looking at the data initially. That validation step is crucial because you're not going to sacrifice having someone, in this case, you're going to have DataBlend, do some validation against your data, and it's going to look something like this. And so you can see that this email here is checking for the amount in that payroll that someone got paid versus the prior payroll. And if you had like a spend control, you had a budget, maybe you wanted to make sure that everyone had, a manager associated with them or certain fields populated. Those are all just examples of different validation of the data that you can do. All of that's happening actively when the integration runs, and then it notifies whomever. In this case, it's notifying me, but if I wanted to go to my payroll manager, that's an option as well. So, and the sky's the limit when it comes to that validation. You just have to determine what you want to check for. But you can see our entry finished up. So let's go into Intacct, and I'm going to come in here and just hit enter. And you can see here's my new entry. If I look at it, pretty simple payroll entry. Nothing unique here. The project's empty though, right? It's not allocated. You can see other than that, it's just by person, and it has a balanced entry created within my PYRJ. So the next step is let's allocate this. And you can do this as part of the same entry. You can do it as a second action like I'm going to do. You can do it at month end, whatever makes sense for you. But I have a workflow set up that I can simply kick off. And when I do, this is going to actually go get my allocations from, in my case, I did Google Sheets. I'm a big Google Sheets guy. I think it's easy to work with, and you can connect directly to it through the API. But within here, it's very simple allocation, right? By person, by project with a percentage. In this case, you can see I took Joe Smith, 75-25, and that's going to allow me to allocate Joe Smith's entry that's already in Intacct. If you had, allocation percentages by month, if you wanted this to get updated based on timesheets, All of that's possible. You can do it if you're in the nonprofit space and you had some predetermined allocations per year contracts and grants, and you wanted to also just have these in here, not a problem. In this process, you can simply just update it and reference it. You also don't have to use Google Sheets. You can use an Excel or some other repository of that data. But in my case, I have my data here, and it's going to then, you can see it's already done. It picked up my allocation, it looked at the latest payroll entry, and then it's going to go and create another entry within Intact for me. Here's my payroll allocation. I can open this up, and when I do, now I see, here's my allocation by project, by person. It took that, whatever in my 60/50 account, my compensation, it's going to then reallocate that down to the different projects. So very simplistic allocation, but just to give you an idea of just how easy it is to have these repeatable tasks that a lot of us do, every month, every week as part of our jobs. This is going to be something that could be automated because the standard practice, there's a logic to it that we can then automate within DataBlend, and then you can still have validation. So just because you've streamlined it doesn't mean you have to have no confidence in the content that's getting moved. You're going to still have that data quality report that I was showing before, do that type of validation that a person would normally do. Right. So those are my two use cases. Now the third thing I wanted to show was the wizards, right? So when this is set up, it works nicely, it's smooth, it's automated and streamlined, but how do we get there? What does that take? How much effort goes into actually setting these types of things up? So I'm going to go into my automate section, I'm going to go to my wizards. So if I go into my wizard, you can see I have a number of different connections here. We're going to take data from HubSpot and send it into Intact, and there's a few different options. These wizards, you can see here, they're finite, right? Not every single use case is in here, but a lot of our popular ones are. I like our HubSpot and Intact one because not only do we use both of those tools internally, but they're relatively new for us. We've spent a lot of time building these out to make it easy for our partners, for our end users to get stood up with these types of integrations quickly. So let's focus on the customer one first. You can see when I make that selection, it creates these 5 steps. I can click through this, and then I simply select the credential we want to use. So I already put this in. I did that in my credentials section up here before we came in. That's about 2 minutes to do that process, so very straightforward. But once I do, it's going to populate all my different HubSpot fields. If you work with HubSpot, these are different properties. And it's going to default with a few that we assume you're going to need for the customers. We assumed city meant city, right? But if you needed to add others, like let's say I want a description, you just move it from the left side to the right side. And you can see I'm not creating any API calls, I'm not doing any scripting, it's just point and click along the way. And now I get to my mapping step. Source is going to be HubSpot, target is going to be Intact. I'm taking my accounts and I'm creating customers between the two. And so if I wanted to make my address go into my address to field, I can just drag and drop, just like that. So it's nice and easy to just simply do this type of mapping. But let's say I have my new field, description, and it doesn't have a place to go within Intact. I can type in or select from the list what field I want that to populate. I'm going to choose comments in this case, and then I'm going to go to my next page. I just need to select the Intact credential that I already put in. If you've worked with Intact, it's a web service user, so it does not carry a charge and allows us to access via the API. And then lastly, it's going to create these 12 different things. So it's doing a lot of stuff, and all I had to do was go through 5 steps in that process. And now it's created a functional integration that I can save. I can run this workflow. And if I go back to my dashboard, I now have a functional integration that we set up in about 2 minutes with me talking through that whole process. It's that easy to stand that up. And really the most important thing that you would need to know in that process is just simply, what are the fields that data is coming from? Where do you want it to go in between? So you make that selection in the mapping, and then it's going to pass through and have a functional integration. And then if we wanted to just put the cherry on top for this integration, we can click into the workflow and we can schedule it. So if we come to our scheduling section here, we can say we want it to run Monday through Friday. Let's not have it process over the weekend. And I want it to run at, let's say, 5 a.m. So I just make my selection like that. And then I'd be able to save this. And now I have a scheduled functional workflow in the matter of minutes to go through this process. Like I said, we don't have a wizard for every single scenario, and you can see it just completed. You can see it popped up at the top that was successful. But if there are, especially for our CAS partners and partners in general, we do recommend always reaching out to us. We're more than happy to have a conversation. If you have a large number of customers that are doing a certain combination of systems, and it would be helpful to have a tool to help automate that process, let us know. Let's talk about it because these wizards, we're constantly investing more time to get them into the system because we want to make all these integrations as close to what you just saw as possible, where you can get this stood up nice and quick. Okay. But that's everything I wanted to show for my product demo for today.